today brought the realization that I have, as a parent, crossed that threshold where when my kid is a part of the children's message, you don't know what he's going to say. Fortunately, it was something relative to what was being talked about, so I was like, oh, good. All that talk about aliens, I didn't know what was going to come out. Well, this morning, I posed this question last week to Wednesday night study, which is another cheap plug for me to put in there if you're not already currently involved in something. That 6:30 on Wednesday, we gather each week for in-depth Bible study. But I asked that group in preparation for today to think about, why are you here? So that's the question I want to ask this morning, just to start off with. Why are you here? And I don't mean this question in an existential reflection of what is the purpose of my existence? Why am I here on this earth? I mean it in the way to ask, why are you here at church today?
For worship.
Hopefully that would be an answer that could be shared by many others. And I'm sure with that, if we were truly honest with ourselves, there's a variety of answers that could be offered. I mean, perhaps you came to church today because you were hoping to feel good. After that song, maybe you got a little bit of that fix, because I was thinking as the choir was singing, man, I'm going to have that one stuck in my head the rest of the day. That's one of those that I know when I hear it, I'm like, yep, I want to be sitting around idle one day this afternoon or one day this week, and all of a sudden it's just going to pop right back into my head. So perhaps you come to church to feel good, to feel uplifted, to find something that just puts a smile on your face. Maybe not just for today, but through the rest of the week. Perhaps some, it's the idea of, I just want to start my week off right. If there's a week that I don't get to church on Sunday, it just feels like everything else. It's just off kilter in some way. It just doesn't feel complete unless I'm able to be at church. Perhaps for some, it's just, this has become tradition and routine. It's what you've always done ever since you were a little kid, that it's what your family did, and that as you got older, you felt it to be important for yourselves, and so you're here week after week because that's the expectation. It's what you're supposed to do. Hopefully, deep down, what we really could say is that we are here to worship, to praise, to exhibit adoration, to give thanks. As long as I can remember, there have been debates over Sabbath and what Sabbath means. And when I was a kid, I was always taught that Sabbath was church. That's what it was meant for. On the Sabbath day, you went to church. It was a time that you put aside everything, if just for a brief moment, and you go and you worship, and it's to be a day of rest. And I remember being a kid and going to church and coming home and eating lunch, and then my dad sitting in his chair to read the paper, and it was just kind of a relaxing afternoon, not a lot planned. Might see some family depending on what the plan was. And really, when you think about it, it's not the command of God. That there would be a day that you put aside the expectations, that you take an opportunity to rest, to reflect, to recharge. And yet, in all the comments I've heard throughout the years, I think I have yet to see a consensus on opinions as they relate to Sabbath. So before we get to the details of that, though, I want us to take a look at some of the origins of how Sabbath came to be. And we all know that we have this command to observe the Sabbath, that there is to be a day. I mean, you find that in the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20. But today I want us to look at Exodus chapter 31, beginning in verse 12, where their scripture tells us, "Then the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. Observe the Sabbath because it is holy to you. Anyone who desecrates it is to be put to death. Those who do any work on that day must be cut off from their people. For 6 days' work is to be done, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death. The Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for the generations to come as a lasting covenant. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Maybe a little scary, because I don't associate Sundays with being a day off for me, if I'm being quite honest. But the command seems simple enough, just don't work. And it's important to note that in this command from God to Moses, does God say it's to be a day of worship and praise and adoration, a day that you're meant to focus solely on God alone, a day that you're supposed to get up and put on some nice looking clothes and head out the door and go to church? Is the command there that this is to be a day of worship? That is what the Sabbath is there for. Well, clearly the command is it's a day of rest. Which is interesting to me. Because, like I said, we typically think of Sabbath. Sabbath is a day of worship. Sabbath is a day you go to church. It's the day that you give all your focus and study and attention to the things of God. I mean, what is this meant for then, if not that, if what we interpret as? Well, then we have to go back and we have to consider, what was God trying to say at this point in history? In the context in which the Israelites lived, what is the point of this? Because really, when you break it down, more of what this is focused at is a command directed at the economic sphere of Israel's life during this time. Because when you think about this, how easy is it for any of us to go a single day without doing work? Who can say that in recent memory you have had a one full day, a 24-hour period, where you have not done any work? Where you didn't wash dishes, you didn't wash clothes, you didn't tend to chores, yard work, you didn't clean anything around the house. Who can say they've had that day? Now, I'm not asking for hands because I have a feeling if they go up, it would be very few. I don't want anybody to feel bad this morning. But I remember as a kid, my best friend growing up once told me on a Saturday, tomorrow I've got to cut the grass. So on a Saturday, he told me that on Sunday he was going to have to cut grass. Well, for years, I've been taught as a kid that Sunday was not a day you cut grass. Sunday was a day of Sabbath rest. You didn't do yard work. And so I expressed this to him. I said, "You cut grass on Sunday?" Oh, because to me, as a little kid, I mean, we were probably, late elementary, early middle school. To me, oh, no, you didn't do that. His comment back to me, "Is Jesus going to come and cut my grass for me?" Ooh. And some of you may think like, "Oh, sacrilege, how dare he say those things?" And some of you might be sitting there going, "Oh, he's got a point." It may sound harsh, but yet, is that not a common mentality? And there's things to get done. There's stuff to do. If you work during the week, by the time the weekend rolls around, I've got to catch up somewhere, right? I've got to get stuff done. And for so many people, Sunday is just another day of the week. I think about that as me and my family, as we get in the car and we head this way. I look around our neighborhood, we pass by places, and I think for so many people, it's just another day. It's another day to catch up on things, another day to do what they want. It's another day to sleep in, catch up on some work, maybe run some errands. Throughout my school years, I used to do homework on Sundays. I mean, yeah, I see that now. Yeah, I had to do homework on a Sunday. I mean, it was due on Monday, so I had to make sure it was finished. I mean, would that not be considered as going against what's commanded? I mean, I was working. I was doing what was it? Yeah, tell it to the teacher. Then the answer I think you get back from the teacher is you should have done it Friday night. But when you think about that, our lives, truly, when you really think about it, our lives demand so much of us. We can't help but be busy, right? It feels like there's always something. There's always something that needs our attention. Something else that has to get done. So the question, really, is not how is this focusing on one particular day. Because when you get down to it, the motivation is not just saying, okay, I want you to have a day where you focus completely on God, that all you do is go to church, because if you get down to it, technically, is not driving a car in some way work? I kind of think so. Not my favorite pastime. Did you cook breakfast this morning? Well, some of you probably depended on the donuts downstairs or Krispy Kreme, I know. But when you think about it, does this really have to do with making sure that you take a day that you just don't do anything, or is it really meant to change your outlook on life and our place in the world? And to understand that, this is why I said you have to understand it in light of the culture in which the commands would have been given. So think about this for just a second. Who were the Israelites? What had they been doing up to this point? What was their purpose? Why were they around? I mean, where had they been? Where are they living? Where did they come from? Egypt. Right. I mean, it is Exodus, so I hope you put that together somewhere. This is Exodus. They were in Egypt. In Egypt, what were they doing? They were slaves. They worked non-stop. This means their lives consisted of making bricks, building buildings, monuments, statues, putting up walls. I mean, they worked non-stop all day long. They did not get a break. They were slaves. Their entire life was all about work, because they lived under the kingdom of Pharaoh, and under Pharaoh, life is life of productivity. Your worth is determined in how much you produce in the course of a day. And then this comes along, and God tells Moses, go to the Israelites and tell them they need a day where they don't work. They need, now here, they're being redefined as people. And their lives to this point, everything has centered around who they were, what they did during their time in Egypt. For many of them, they knew no different. This is just what life was. Life was work and productivity. And so this commandment reminds them, have time where you don't work. Have time where you just don't do anything. Because as slaves in Egypt, they work every day. No break, no vacation. You work. Because that's who you are. They're treated as objects, not people. They're a means to an end. You get out there, you do what you're supposed to do, no questions. Truly, what we're seeing is a command given to people who are being exploited at every turn of their lives. This is why God told Moses the Sabbath is punishable by death if it is violated. To profane the Sabbath is jeopardizing all that is precious that defines Israel's existence in the world and its loyalty to God. The Sabbath day, why this command is given, is essentially to tell those Israelites, you are not in Egypt anymore. This is not the defining attribute of your existence. Your value as a human being does not come from how many bricks you can make in the course of a day. It is not defined by how fast you get your work done. Your life is not wrapped up in what you do. This command is given to show them their significance comes from the God who rescued them. The one who brought them out of that life, who offers them a new life, who shows them love at every turn. And you notice that command there at the end of 13. Say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you will know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. It's a statement that helps us understand the intention of Sabbath. God says so that they will know God is Lord who makes them holy. God is the one who makes us holy. God is the one who makes us valuable, nothing else. That's inherent in the command. Too often in life, we place our value and worth as a human being as an individual on the tasks that we can accomplish. What can I get done? And we gauge our worth by the measure of our personal success. This is what I have accomplished with the time that I have been given. Think about that. When you meet someone for the first time, as you're finding out all about that person, is not what you do or did for a living one of the first topics of conversation. This is my name. This is what I do. Because it becomes such an identifying feature of who we are. This is where I contribute. This is where I produce. This is what I make, bring with me to the table. Our worth is designated so often by how we do our jobs, how efficient we can be, how much we can make or produce. And the Sabbath is meant to show us that true worth, true value in our lives only comes from knowing the God who loves us, who liberates us from sin as he liberated the Israelites from slavery. The Sabbath is there to remind us we are not our jobs. We are not how much money we make. We are not defined by how hard that we can work. And a problem that we run into is we reduce the Sabbath to just, it's a day of the week. It's just another day, which is what it is. It's a day during the week. But the point of this is that it isn't just that. Sabbath is meant to inform how we live all the time. Because you think about it. The way we've understood it for so long, how hard is it to go from operating at 100 miles an hour during the week to 0 for a day? Because we get conditioned that this is what life is. Life is all about go, do, make, accomplish, build something. And then all of a sudden it's stop. Have one day where you don't do a thing, and the only thing that you put at the forefront of your mind is how much you love God. How easy is that to do when you're conditioned that life operates in a certain way? So we remember the Sabbath and the purpose of it because it reminds us, even when you aren't working, even when you're not producing, making, building, you are still loved. Because I believe that we seek that validation. We seek that approval. We want somehow to prove our worth, our value. We want others to give us that assurance that I'm meaningful, that I belong, that I have a reason. And then we come across something that tells us those aren't the defining attributes of your existence. That as a believer, your true inherent value comes from knowing you are loved. Remember, the Sabbath is taking a day during the week to remind ourselves we didn't make the world. We didn't build it. We didn't craft it. And it will continue to exist without our efforts. Remember, the Sabbath is a day when our work is done, even if it isn't. Remember, the Sabbath is a day when our job is to enjoy. Period. Remember, the Sabbath is a day when we are fully available to ourselves and those we love most. Remember, the Sabbath is a day that we remember that when God made the world, God saw that it was good. Remember, the Sabbath is a day that we aren't responsible for producing something. Remember, the Sabbath is a day that we remind ourselves we aren't machines. Remember, the Sabbath is a day, and this one is probably one of the hardest ones, where we can say, I didn't do anything, and add to it, and I don't feel guilty. Sabbath is a day when the phone is turned off. And how hard is that one? Sabbath is a day that we don't check emails. How hard is that one? Sabbath is a day that we understand the world will continue to turn, even without us in it. The rest that we enjoy on a Sabbath day reflects God's own rest at creation. But we also must make sure that a Sabbath day of rest is not just for the sole purpose of recuperation for the next day's work. Because how many of us go into a day of rest with that in mind? I need to be refreshed and renewed so I can tackle everything all over again because it starts back tomorrow. Because the rest that we experience on a Sabbath is meant to be the culmination of a week's work, where the accomplishments are done. Because just as God, when creation was complete, stepped back and rested in the knowledge that it is good, so too should we be able to rest easy in the confidence God has control of creation, not us. And that's a good thing.
Amen.
Israel was meant to put their trust in this glorious God who overrides Pharaoh's production schedule, who overrides the workload that had been supplied to them by an empire, and to experience joyful rest as a defining aspect of life and creation. The Sabbath is so much more than what we have made it out to be. The Sabbath reminds us we are not slaves. We're not slaves to a person, to a dollar, to a business, or to an understanding that is based in some sort of societal context. Our worth as created human beings comes from the God who loves us, from the God who created each of us. A Sabbath day helps us remember we are not captives, forced to work in order to prove our significance. Because our true value and significance comes from the God who loves us enough to liberate us from all forms of bondage. So on this Sabbath day, do you find yourself still bound by the conventions that have been established in our culture? Do you find yourself convinced that your inherent value and worth comes from how much you are able to produce and work and prove yourself? My prayer for all of us is that each in our own individual ways and collectively would experience the love of God that teaches us our worth is not confined to the definition of productivity. Our worth comes truly from being loved. Amen.
Amen.
And amen. So on this Sabbath day, we're reminded of something valuable to our existence. The love of God that reaches into our lives, that shows us how each of us is so deeply cherished. My hope today, if you're here as a professed believer, is that you have that reassurance of God's love to know that your value comes from our Creator, our Sustainer, the one who redeems us from the sin in our lives. And if you're here today and maybe you don't know that love for yourself, my hope is that you would see that it is offered to us under the lordship of Jesus Christ. That through his sacrifice we were given that love freely as a gift. Our responsibility is to receive it and to make the most of it. And if you're here today and maybe you've been trying to find that place, somewhere that you could feel at home, a place of worship, a place of rest, we hope that you would find it here. Would you please stand? as we sing our hymn of invitation, number 446, Take Time to Behold. Just a few reminders for you, keeping in mind this week is the Heck Jones week of prayer. If you are interested in contributing to the Heck Jones offering, the envelopes should be in the pew pockets if you have not already done so. Please be in prayer for how our resources can go to better help with missions projects that we see throughout, not just here in our own country, throughout the world, as we have so many ways that we can minister through providing and sharing with that we have made available to us. Also, for this week, Missions Committee meeting, Deacons meeting, if you're on those, keep in mind we have those coming up. Then this Wednesday night, the fellowship meal is a special one for Valentine's Day. I think chicken cordon bleu is on the menu. So if you would like to be part of that, please make sure that you sign up early. They do need a definitive head count for this one to prepare. So if you have not already made your reservations for Wednesday night and you would like to, just make sure that you have those in by tomorrow. If you didn't drop anything in the plate today, you can call the office. That's fine. But they will need to have a head count for that. Want to remind you as well that tickets are available for the soup and salad fundraiser. If you would like those, you can talk to Shelby, to Brenda. I believe they have tickets available today if you would like to go ahead and purchase those. And did you say you're going to be up here at the front? If anybody's interested in picking those up today, you can get those. Or if you would like to get some to sell, the prices are listed there, $10, and keeping in mind, if some of you have looked at that and gone, $10, they went up this year. It is all you can eat. So you can come that day and get your fill on the food that is there. And keeping in mind as we approach that date that we will need hands to help with setup, to get the crock pots moved back and forth. So we want to give a hand where you can. If you're free that day, please make it a point to help out with that. Kids are $5. Under 3 can eat for free. All proceeds for this go to the Capital Maintenance Fund, which already we've got another need there that we were just talking about before service started. So there's always something to make sure that we're keeping up our facilities and the resources that have been entrusted to our care. So please be in prayer as well for how you can help with that. And as we conclude our service for today, I'm going to ask if you would to please bow for pronouncement of the benediction. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord be gracious unto you and give you his peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.